Neighbor catches pregnant woman carrying corn sacks. His reaction shocks everyone. Sarah Miller felt the weight of the third sack of corn burning her shoulders as the afternoon sun beat down on the small rented plot on the outskirts of Asheville. Her hands trembled. Her 8-month belly felt like it weighed a ton, but she couldn't stop. Not now. That's when she heard the unmistakable click of a phone being unlocked. Turning her head, still bent under the weight of the sack, she saw Arthur Jenkins standing by the fence that separated the properties. He wasn't offering help. He was filming. "What are you doing?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice coming out strained from the effort. Arthur didn't answer. His eyes, usually empty of any emotion, gleamed with something that seemed like a mix of contempt and satisfaction. The phone was still pointed at her, capturing every second of the scene. "Mr. Arthur, please don't." But it was too late. She saw him tap the screen, probably sending the video somewhere. Panic took over Sarah. That man had no idea what he had just destroyed. Or maybe he knew very well. Sarah dropped the sack on the ground, feeling a sharp pain in her lower back. She needed to go after him, explain, beg if necessary. But as she took her first steps, a new contraction paralyzed her. It wasn't normal. They were just Braxton Hicks contractions, she repeated to herself. They had to be. Arthur was already crossing his backyard, heading home as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just dropped a bomb on her life. 2 hours later, Sarah was sitting on the floor of her small room in the back of the house she shared with 3 other families. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. They were messages from the neighborhood watch group. She didn't need to open them to know what they said. She knew that kind of people. She knew that kind of judgment. But she opened them anyway. And each word was a stab. "Look at the shame living here in our neighborhood. Pregnant like that and carrying weight. Does she want something to happen to the child? Her husband is in the hospital and she's doing this. What kind of woman is that? I bet it's not even his kid." That last message came from a number she didn't recognize, but she recognized the malice. Arthur had shared the video not only in the neighborhood watch group, but to other contacts as well. Sarah felt the tears burn her eyes, not for herself, but for what this meant. She had gotten 3 new clients the week before, 3 women who bought her cornbread muffins and corn cakes. With that money, added to what she had already saved, she would be able to pay for 2 more weeks of David's treatment. 2 weeks that could make the difference between him coming home or... No. She couldn't think about that. The phone rang again. This time, it was a call. Mrs. Beverly, one of her clients. "Sarah, dear, I saw the video." "Mrs. Beverly, I can explain." "You don't need to explain anything, sweetie. I'm just calling to let you know I won't be able to buy your cornbread muffins anymore. My son saw the video and said he doesn't want me encouraging this kind of behavior. Sorry, okay?" The call ended before Sarah could answer, and then came the second call, and the third, all with the same message, all with the same apologetic tone that wasn't really apologizing. In less than 3 hours, Sarah had lost all her clients. She looked at the calendar pinned to the wall with a piece of already yellowed tape. 12 days until the next payment to Central Mercy Hospital. 12 days to come up with $2,400. 12 days that now seemed like an impossible eternity. David couldn't know. He believed the money came from Aunt Patricia, who lived in Scranton and had promised to help. But Aunt Patricia could barely pay her own bills. Sarah had invented that story so David wouldn't worry, so he could focus on recovering. Now, sitting in that cramped room, with the sounds of the other tenants filtering through the thin walls, Sarah wondered how she had ended up at this point. 6 months ago, she and David had their own house. Small, but it was theirs. David worked as a painter, and she sold her baked goods at the market. They didn't have much left over, but enough. Then came the dizziness, then the fainting at work, then the tests, and finally the diagnosis that changed everything. David needed an expensive treatment that the public system didn't fully cover. They sold the house, sold the car, sold everything of value they had, and even then it wasn't enough. The treatment was like a bottomless pit, always asking for more. Sarah ran a hand over her belly, feeling the baby move. At least this pregnancy had been planned, coming at a time when they still had hope. Now the same belly that should have been a symbol of joy was seen as an obstacle. But she didn't regret it. She would never regret it. A new weight settled on her chest. Tomorrow she would have to visit David at Central Mercy Hospital, and he always noticed when something was wrong. She would have to lie better, smile more convincingly, make up stories about how Aunt Patricia was being generous. The sun was setting when Sarah finally got up. She had work to do. Even without customers, she still had corn stockpiled. She could try selling on the street door to door. Someone would buy. Someone had to buy. She started processing the corn, grating each ear with her already calloused hands. The repetitive motion calmed her, gave her hands a purpose while her mind wandered through dark territories. Each grated ear was a small victory. Each wrapped cornbread muffin was a possibility. It was past 11 at night when she finished. 24 cornbread muffins wrapped in corn husks tied with string. She calculated the price. If she sold them all at $8 each, she would have $192. Not much, but it was a start. Sarah lay down in bed, but sleep didn't come. Her mind kept replaying the day's events, searching for the exact moment when everything fell apart. And it always came back to that image. Arthur Jenkins standing by the fence, his cell phone pointed at her, that strange glint in his eyes. She had known him for 2 years, ever since she moved to that street. He was a lonely man, retired, who spent his days sitting on his porch watching the neighborhood. Sarah always greeted him, even when he didn't respond. A few times she tried to talk, offered him a piece of corn cake. He always refused with a wave of his hand, as if her mere presence was an annoyance. David said that Arthur was just a cranky old man, that she shouldn't mind. But Sarah always felt there was something more, a sadness so deep it had turned into something hard and cutting. Now, lying in the dark, she wondered what could have stirred such hatred in that man. Why had he chosen to destroy the little she had? Was there pure malice in that act, or was there something else she couldn't see? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next day dawned grey, perfectly matching Sarah's mood. She prepared a bundle of cornbread muffins and left early, before the other tenants woke up. She didn't want to face judging looks. Not now. The first 5 houses turned her down. Politely, but they turned her down. At the 6th house, an old woman opened the door and, recognizing Sarah, slammed it in her face without a word. At the 7th, a man laughed when she offered the cornbread muffins. "You're the one from the video, right? What a shame. Go home and rest, woman." Sarah felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to answer, wanted to scream that she was doing exactly that to take care of her sick husband. But the words wouldn't come out. She just moved on to the next house. By noon, she had sold only 7 cornbread muffins, $56. That wouldn't even cover the gas she used to cook them. That's when she saw Mrs. Martha crossing the street toward her. Martha was a 72-year-old woman who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. She knew everyone, respected by all. Sarah felt a momentary relief. If anyone could help her clear her name, it was Mrs. Martha. "Sarah, my dear, I've seen what they've been saying about you." "Mrs. Martha, you know my situation. You know I would never do anything to harm my baby. But David needs—" "I know, dear, I know." Martha placed a wrinkled hand on Sarah's shoulder. "And I believe you. But you need to understand that folks won't see things the same way. Especially after Mr. Arthur spread the word that—" "Spread what?" Martha looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "He's been saying that the baby might not be David's, that you were carrying those bags for a man who showed up on the lot." Sarah felt the world spin. The accusation was so absurd, so grotesque, that she couldn't even form a response. She just stood there, the bundle of cornbread muffins heavy in her arms, while silent tears streamed down her face. "Dear, go home." Martha squeezed her shoulder harder. "This isn't work for a woman in your condition. I'll try to talk to the folks, explain your situation. But it'll take time." "I don't have time, Mrs. Martha." Sarah's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "The payment is due in 11 days. If I can't get the money—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Martha understood. How much do you need? 2,400. Martha closed her eyes for a moment, as if doing mental calculations. I don't have that amount, dear. My pension barely covers me, but let me see what I can do. Maybe if I talk to Father Michael, he can organize a collection at the church. No, Sarah said firmly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I don't want charity. I'll figure it out. Sarah, this isn't... Thank you for caring, Mrs. Martha, but I need to sort this out on my own. Sarah turned her back before Martha could continue. She knew she was being proud, knew she was refusing help when she needed it most, but there was a limit to how much she could humiliate herself. The video, the accusations, the pitying and judging looks were already enough. She couldn't bear being the neighborhood's charity project. When she got home, Sarah found a note stuck to her door. It was from Mr. Harrison, the owner of the lot where she grew corn. He wanted to see her that very afternoon. Her stomach churned. She knew what that meant. At 3 in the afternoon, Sarah stood in front of Mr. Harrison's small brick house. He received her on the porch without inviting her inside. It was never a good sign when Mr. Harrison didn't invite someone in. Sarah, I'll be straight with you. He began, arms crossed over his chest. I saw the video Arthur posted. I saw the comments. My daughter called me from Denver asking if I knew there was a pregnant woman working like a slave on my lot. Mr. Harrison, I pay the rent on the lot every month. You never complained before. Because I didn't know you were working in that condition. I thought you just went there to harvest every now and then. But carrying sacks like that? He shook his head. That's giving my property a bad name. People are saying I'm exploiting you. Nobody is exploiting me. I chose to work. Maybe. But that's not how people see it. He sighed, looking genuinely uncomfortable. Look, I like you, Sarah. You've always paid on time, never caused any trouble. But I can't have this kind of mess. I have to think about my reputation. You're going to kick me off the lot. It wasn't a question. I'll give you until the end of the month to get your stuff out of there. And look, I won't charge you rent for this month. Consider it a help. Sarah wanted to laugh. A help. He was taking away her only source of income and calling it help. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, she managed to say, her voice surprisingly steady. As she left, Sarah felt as if she were walking in a bad dream, or rather, a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. In less than 24 hours, she had lost her clients, her reputation, and now her lot. The house of cards she had so carefully built was crumbling, and all because of a video, all because of Arthur Jenkins. That night, Sarah couldn't eat. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the last amount of money she had saved, $340. Added to the $56 she had earned today, she had $396. She was $2,004 short. She needed a miracle. She thought about David, lying in that hospital bed, with no idea of the hell she was living. He would ask about the treatment tomorrow when she went to visit him. He always asked, even if he tried to hide his concern. And she would have to lie again, say everything was under control, that Aunt Patricia had sent more money. But how long could she keep up that lie? The answer came faster than she expected. The next morning, as Sarah was getting ready to go to the hospital, her phone rang. It was Brandon, David's younger brother. Sarah, David is asking why Aunt Patricia isn't answering his calls. He tried calling her 3 times yesterday. Sarah's heart stopped. Did he say anything? He said he wanted to thank her for all the help. He's suspicious that you're hiding something from him so he won't worry. I tried to cover, said Aunt Patricia probably has no signal, but you know how he is. He won't rest until he talks to her. What do I do, Brandon? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Brandon was 22, working at a mechanic shop earning minimum wage. He could barely support himself. He couldn't help, even if he wanted to. Tell him the truth, Brandon finally said. He'll be mad that you lied, but he'll understand. It's better than him finding out some other way. He can't get upset. The doctor said any stress could make his condition worse. And you think it's less stressful for him to be in doubt, not being able to trust his own wife? Brandon's words hurt, but he was right. Sarah knew it. I'll tell him. Today, when I go there. Do you want me to come with you? No, This is between me and him." The call ended, and Sarah stared at the phone in her hands. The cracked screen reflected her distorted face. She looked 10 years older. She looked like someone who had been broken and poorly put back together. The hospital was a 40-minute bus ride. Sarah made the trip in silence, watching the city pass by the fogged-up window. It was a cloudy day, with rain threatening. The people on the streets walked hurriedly, each carrying their own invisible burdens. She wondered how many of those people were also on the verge of collapse. How many kept up a facade of normalcy, while everything fell apart inside? How many lied to the people they loved because the truth was too heavy? David was awake when she arrived at the room. He shared the space with 3 other patients, separated only by thin curtains that guaranteed no privacy at all. He smiled when he saw her, but Sarah noticed that the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, love." She approached, giving him a kiss on his forehead. He was thinner, his skin paler. The treatment was taking its toll. "Where's Aunt Patricia's phone number?" David got straight to the point. "I tried calling several times and she doesn't answer." Sarah pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her bag on her lap. "David, I need to tell you something." She saw his expression change, worry replacing curiosity. "Is something wrong with Aunt?" "No, Aunt is fine." Sarah took a deep breath. "But she's not sending money." The silence that followed was painful. David stared at her, processing the information. "What do you mean?" "I lied to you. Aunt can't afford to help. She never could. The money for your treatment, I've been getting it." "How?" "I planted corn on Mr. Harrison's land. I make cornbread muffins, corn cakes. I sell them to the neighbors." David closed his eyes, his hands clenching into fists on the white sheet. "How long?" 3 months. 3 months, he repeated, his voice dangerously low. "You deceived me for 3 months. I didn't want to worry you. You need to focus on getting better. And you thought I'd get better knowing my pregnant wife is killing herself, working to pay for my treatment." He opened his eyes, and Sarah saw anger there. Anger and something worse. Disappointment. "Did you think I'm that weak?" "That's not it." "Then what is it?" He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness made him fall back onto the pillow. "Answer me, Sarah. What is it?" "It's love." The tears finally came, hot and uncontrollable. "It's desperation. It's doing what needs to be done because the alternative is losing you, and I can't. I won't let that happen." Her voice broke on the last word. David looked at her for a long moment, and then reached out his hand. Sarah held it, squeezing tightly. "You should have told me," he said, calmer now. "We always figured everything out together." "I know. I'm sorry." "And now? Do you still have money for the next payment?" It was then that Sarah had to tell the rest. The video, the accusations, the lost clients, the land that would soon no longer be hers. And as she spoke, she saw the anger return to David's face, but this time it wasn't directed at her. "Arthur Jenkins did this." David practically spat the name. "He filmed it and spread it to everyone. That bastard!" David tried to get up again, but Sarah held him back. "No, you can't get upset. I'll destroy him. I'll sue. You won't do anything," Sarah said firmly. "You're going to stay here and get better. That's what you're going to do." "And the money, how will you get the money?" That was the question Sarah didn't know how to answer. She opened her mouth, closed it again. She had no answer. "For the treatment," David said after a moment. "Cancel everything." "What? No." "Sarah, you're 8 months pregnant. You can't keep working like this, and I won't let you kill yourself because of me." "David, don't talk nonsense. You need this treatment. And you need to take care of our child." He squeezed her hand. "If I can't get better, at least you and the baby will be fine." "No." Sarah stood up, letting go of his hand. "We're not having this conversation. I'll figure something out. I always figure something out." "With what money, Sarah? Where are you going to get $2,000 in 10 days? "I don't know, but I'll find out." She turned her back and left the room before he could keep arguing. Before she could see the tears she knew were falling down his face, before she herself completely fell apart. In the hallway of Central Mercy Hospital, Sarah leaned against the wall and let her body slide down to the floor. There, sitting on the cold floor, with the coming and going of doctors and nurses, she finally allowed reality to hit her full force. She had no way to get that money. She had no more clients, no more land, nothing left to sell. And in 10 days, David's treatment would be suspended. She knew what that meant. The doctors had been clear. Without treatment, his condition would deteriorate rapidly. They had at best 2 months, at worst 2 weeks. How had she gotten to this point? How, in a matter of months, had her life turned into this nightmare? "Are you okay?" Sarah looked up and saw a young doctor standing in front of her. She was at most 30, hair tied in a ponytail, dark eyes full of genuine concern. "I'm fine." Sarah tried to stand up, but her legs trembled and she had to lean against the wall. The doctor held her arm, helping her balance. "You don't look fine. Are you in pain? Contractions?" "No, Sarah stopped, realizing it was no use lying. "I just need a minute." "How many months pregnant are you?" 8. The doctor looked at her more closely, noticing the deep dark circles, the calloused hands, the way Sarah held her lower back as if it hurt. "Come with me. I'll examine you." "It's not necessary. I can't pay." "I didn't ask for your credit card. I asked you to come with me." There was a firmness in the doctor's voice that left no room for argument. Sarah followed her into a small exam room. There, the doctor measured her blood pressure, examined her belly, asked questions about food and rest. "Your blood pressure is high," she said finally. "Are you eating properly?" "Yes." "A lie." The doctor crossed her arms. "You're malnourished and clearly exhausted. When was the last time you slept a full night?" Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't remember. "Look, I don't know what's going on in your life and you don't have to tell me, but I've been a doctor long enough to recognize when someone is at their limit, and you are. If you keep this up, you'll end up with complications in your pregnancy. Or worse." "I can't stop," Sarah said, her voice coming out as a whisper. "If I stop, my husband—" And then, to her own surprise, she told everything. The words came out in an uncontrolled flood, as if a dam had broken. She told about David, about the treatment, about the video, about Arthur. She told about the lost clients and the land that would soon no longer be hers. She told about the $2,000 she didn't have and the 10 days that weren't enough. The doctor listened in silence. When Sarah finally finished, exhausted by her own story, the doctor sighed. "My name is Allison, Dr. Allison Reed." She introduced herself. "And I'm going to help you." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to, but I'm going to help anyway." Allison opened her purse and took out a wallet. "This here is $300. It's not much, but it's what I have in cash right now." "I can't accept it." "Yes, you can, and you will." Allison placed the money in Sarah's hand, closing her fingers over the bills. "Besides, I'm going to talk to some people. Doctors, nurses. Maybe we can put together a bit more." "Why are you doing this?" Allison was silent for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Because I've been through something similar," she said finally. "Not exactly the same, but close enough to understand what you're feeling. And because no one should have to choose between taking care of the ones they love and taking care of themselves." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. It was the first genuine kindness she had received in days, and it was almost too much for her to bear. "Thank you." That was all she could say. "Don't thank me yet." Allison gave a small smile. "Now give me your number. I'll call you as soon as I can scrape together more money. And you, go home, eat something decent, and rest. That's a doctor's order." Sarah left Central Mercy Hospital with $300 extra in her pocket and a small flicker of hope in her chest. It wasn't enough, not by a long shot, but it was something. It was more than she had when she woke up that morning. The bus back was packed. Sarah only got a seat because an older woman insisted on giving up hers. She thanked her and sat down, feeling the fatigue weigh on every muscle in her body. Through the window, she watched the neighborhood go by, the same streets she had walked trying to sell cornbread muffins, the same houses whose doors had been slammed in her face. And then she saw something that made her blood run cold. Arthur Jenkins was standing in front of the local supermarket, chatting animatedly with a group of women. He was gesturing, clearly telling some story. And from the way the women reacted, nodding in agreement, Sarah knew exactly what he was talking about. About her. The anger she had managed to keep under control over the past few days exploded. Without thinking clearly, Sarah pressed the bus stop button and got off at the next stop. She walked back, each step fueling the fury growing in her chest. When she got close to the group, the conversation stopped. All the women turned to look at her, their faces showing a mix of surprise and discomfort, except for Arthur. He stared at her with that same empty expression as always. "Mr. Arthur," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I need to talk to you." "I've got nothing to say to you," he replied, turning his back. "I think you do." Sarah moved around, standing in front of him again. "Do you have any idea what you've done? What your lies have caused?" "Lies?" Arthur let out a bitter laugh. "I just filmed the truth. A pregnant woman killing herself with work. If you're ashamed of what you do, that's your problem, not mine. I'm not ashamed of working. I'm ashamed of living in the same neighborhood as a man like you." The women around them started murmuring. Some seemed shocked by Sarah's boldness. Others, however, seemed to think she might be right. "You don't know anything about me," Arthur said, his voice dropping to something almost threatening. "And you don't know anything about me." Sarah stepped forward, refusing to be intimidated. "You don't know why I work. You don't know what I'm going through. But still you decided to judge me. You decided to spread lies, destroy my reputation, take away my way of supporting my family. And for what? What do you get out of it?" Arthur opened his mouth to answer, but Sarah didn't let him. "My husband is in the hospital. He's fighting for every day of life he has left. And I'm doing everything I can to keep him alive. Everything. Even if that means carrying bags of corn. Even if that means working until my belly aches and my hands bleed. Because that's what love does. It turns you into someone stronger than you ever thought you could be." Her voice was rising now, carrying all the emotion she had held back. "But you wouldn't understand that, would you? Because to spread that kind of malice, to try to destroy someone who never did anything to you, you have to be very empty, very unhappy. And I feel sorry for you, Mr. Arthur, because in the end, I still have love in my life. I still have someone to fight for. And you? What do you have?" The silence that followed was absolute. People on the street had stopped to watch the scene. Arthur was pale, his fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, Sarah thought he would explode, scream, maybe even lunge at her. But he did none of that. Instead, he simply turned and started walking toward his house. His steps were stiff, mechanical, as if every movement hurt. Sarah stood there, trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. What had she done? Had she only made things worse? That's when she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Mrs. Martha. "Serves you right, girl." Someone had to tell him those things. Other women began to approach, some offering words of support, others looking ashamed. One of them, Diane, owner of the corner bakery, took Sarah's hand. "I'll buy your cornbread muffins," she said. "Every week if you want, and I'll spread the word to my customers too." "I'll buy some too," said another woman. "I'm sorry I believed the gossip." One by one, the women who had turned against Sarah began to offer support. Not all of them, but enough to make a difference. Enough for her to feel that maybe, just maybe, things could start to get better. But that night, when Sarah finally returned home, she couldn't shake the image of Arthur's face when she asked him what was wrong. The pain she saw there, too quick to be hidden, was real, deep, and for some reason, that bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Maybe because deep down she knew that people don't become so bitter without reason. They don't destroy others without having been destroyed themselves. And Sarah asked herself for the first time, What must have happened to Arthur Jenkins to turn him into that empty man who spread malice like someone scattering seeds? But she wouldn't have much time to think about that, because the next morning she would wake up with a sharp pain in her belly that would shatter her world in a completely new way. The first rays of sun had barely appeared on the horizon when Sarah woke up with a sharp pang that made her double over. For a moment she froze, waiting for the pain to pass, but it didn't. Instead, another came and another. She looked at the clock on the nightstand. 5:40 in the morning. Still too early. Maybe they were just Braxton Hicks contractions. Maybe if she breathed right, calmed down, they would go away. But deep in her heart, Sarah knew that wasn't it. Something was wrong. The next contraction came stronger, making her groan. She tried to get up, but her legs wouldn't obey. Panic began to take over. It was too early. The baby couldn't be born now. She was still in her 32nd week. With trembling hands, Sarah managed to grab her phone and call Brandon, David's brother. "Sarah?" His voice sounded sleepy, confused. "It's 5:30 in the morning. Brandon, I need help," she managed to say between contractions. "I think the baby is coming." Brandon's tone changed immediately. "I'm on my way. Hang in there." The wait was agony. Every minute felt like an hour. The contractions continued, more frequent, more painful. Sarah held onto the edge of the bed, trying to control her breathing, trying not to panic. When Brandon finally arrived, 15 minutes later, he found Sarah lying on her side, hugging a pillow, her face wet with sweat and tears. "Jesus, Sarah." He ran to her, helping her up. "Come on, my car is at the door." "David," she started. "I'll let him know on the way. Let's go now." The trip to Central Mercy Hospital was a blur of pain and fear. Brandon drove as fast as he could without being too dangerous, talking to Sarah the whole time, trying to keep her conscious and focused. "Breathe, Sarah, that's it. Slow down, you're going to be fine." But Sarah could barely hear. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying everything that had happened. The stress, the hard work, the confrontation with Arthur, could that have been it? Could she have caused that in the baby? When they arrived at the hospital, a team was already waiting. Brandon had called ahead. Sarah was placed on a stretcher and rushed to an exam room. That's when she saw a familiar face. Dr. Allison was there, wearing a white coat with that same expression of genuine concern. "Sarah," she approached, taking her hand. "I'm here. You're not alone." "The baby," Sarah managed to whisper. "Too early." "I know, but you're in the best place possible right now. We're going to take care of both of you." The doctors examined Sarah quickly. The news was not good. She was in premature labor, likely triggered by extreme stress and physical exhaustion. The baby was in distress. "We're going to have to do an emergency C-section," one of the doctors explained. "The baby needs to come out now." "But it's too early." Sarah was crying now, unable to stop. "He's not ready." "I know. But if we wait, we could lose both of you." The doctor was gentle but firm. "Do you trust us?" Sarah had no choice. She nodded, and then everything started happening very fast. Papers to sign, anesthesia, bright lights above her head. And through it all, Allison's hand holding hers, a fixed point in the midst of the chaos. "You're going to be a mother in a few minutes," Allison whispered. "Think about that, about how you'll hold your baby for the first time." Sarah tried to focus on that, on the moment she could look into her son's eyes, on the moment when everything would make sense. But when the baby was finally born, after an emergency C-section, there was no crying. There was only silence. A terrible, absolute silence. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Sarah saw the doctors and nurses move quickly, taking the small body to a table nearby. She tried to see, tried to get up, but the anesthesia and the fresh incision kept her pinned to the stretcher. "My baby," she cried. "Please, someone tell me something." Allison squeezed her hand tighter. "They're doing everything they can." The seconds dragged on like hours. Sarah couldn't stop looking at that corner of the room where her entire life depended on the desperate work of the medical team, and then finally, like a miracle, came the most beautiful sound she had ever heard, a cry. Weak but determined, the cry of someone fighting to stay in this world. "He's breathing," one of the doctors announced. "It's a boy. Low weight, he'll need to stay in the neonatal ICU for a while, but he's breathing." Sarah felt like she could fly. The tears falling now were of relief, of gratitude, of a love so immense it seemed impossible to fit in her chest. "Can I see him?" The doctors exchanged glances, and then one of the nurses brought the baby, wrapped in a thermal blanket. He was tiny, with reddish, wrinkled skin, his eyes still closed. But he was perfect. He was hers. "Hi, my love," Sarah whispered, gently touching the baby's little face. "You're so strong. As strong as your mother." The moment was brief. The baby needed to go to the neonatal ICU immediately, but it was enough. Enough for Sarah to know there was a reason to keep fighting, a reason greater than herself. As she was taken to the recovery room, Sarah thought about David. He still didn't know he had become a father. Brandon had called the hospital, but David was asleep when the news came. He would wake up and find out he had a son who came into the world too early, just like everything else in their lives seemed to happen at the wrong time. But he was alive, and that was the only thing that mattered. In the recovery room, after the anesthesia started to wear off and the real pain of the incision took its place, Sarah was lying down when Allison walked in. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got run over by a truck." Sarah tried to smile. "But relieved." "So relieved." "Your baby is stable. His vital signs are good. He'll need to stay in the ICU for a few weeks, but the outlook is positive." "A few weeks," Sarah repeated, feeling the weight of those words. A few weeks in the neonatal ICU meant astronomical costs, costs she couldn't pay. As if reading her thoughts, Allison sat on the edge of the bed. "I talked to the hospital administration. I managed to get them to agree to split the costs of the delivery and the ICU. You'll pay little by little, interest-free." "How did you manage that?" "I know the right people, and I told them your story. Sarah, you've touched a lot of people here at the hospital. Doctors, nurses, even the cleaning staff, everyone is rooting for you." Sarah didn't know what to say. The kindness of that woman who barely knew her was overwhelming. "I'll never be able to thank you enough." "Then don't try." Allison smiled. "Just focus on recovering and taking care of that little fighter. We'll figure out the rest gradually." After Allison left, Sarah was alone with her thoughts. Her son was alive. David was alive. She was alive. Despite everything, despite every obstacle and every misfortune, they were still here, still fighting. But the fight was far from over. In fact, Sarah had a feeling it was just beginning. 2 days later, David was finally able to go to the neonatal ICU to see his son. He was in a wheelchair, still weak from his own treatment, but his eyes glistened with tears as he looked through the glass at that tiny being, connected to tubes and monitors. "He's so small," he whispered, "but he's strong." Sarah was beside him, also in a wheelchair, still recovering from the C-section, just like us. David took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "We'll name him Noah. It means God has heard, because I think someone up there is listening to our prayers." "Noah." Sarah smiled through her tears. "It's perfect." They stayed there for an hour, just looking at their son, making silent plans for a future that still seemed uncertain yet possible. And for a brief moment, Sarah allowed herself to forget about the unpaid bills, the expensive treatments, Arthur Jenkins, and everything else that weighed on her shoulders. For a brief moment she was just a mother looking at her child, and that was enough. But reality has a cruel way of always coming back. On the 5th day after the delivery, when Sarah was already home but visiting Noah every day at the hospital, she received a call from the financial department. The payment for David's treatment was overdue. They would give 5 more days. After that, the treatment would be suspended. Sarah looked at the $300 Allison had given her, plus the $400 that some neighbors had raised after the confrontation with Arthur. $700. She was short 1,700. She was sitting on the small bed in her room, doing and redoing calculations in an old notebook, when she heard a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Martha. "Sarah, dear, there's someone here who wants to talk to you." "Who?" Martha didn't answer, just shrugged with a strange expression on her face. Sarah got up with difficulty, still feeling the pain from the surgery, and went to the door. Standing there, with his hands in his pockets and his eyes fixed on the ground, was Arthur Jenkins. Sarah froze. Every word she had yelled at him that day came back to her mind. Every painful truth she had thrown in his face. And now he was there, at her front door. "Mr. Arthur," she managed to say, her voice cold. "What do you want?" He looked up, and Sarah saw something there she had never seen before. Shame, remorse, and something that looked a lot like pain. He began, then stopped, as if the words were too difficult. "I came to apologize." Sarah didn't say anything. She just waited. "What I did was wrong," Arthur continued, the words coming out slowly, as if they hurt to be spoken. "I had no right to film you. I had no right to spread those lies, and I certainly had no right to try to destroy your life." "Then why did you do it?" Arthur was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with an old pain. "Because I was angry. Angry to see you working like that, pregnant, killing yourself. Because—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "Because that's how I lost my daughter." Sarah felt the ground disappear from under her feet. "What?" "She was pregnant. 7 months. And she kept working in the fields because we needed the money. I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen. She said it was fine, that she was strong." Tears began to run down Arthur's wrinkled face, until the day she collapsed in the middle of the plantation. By the time we got to Central Mercy Hospital, it was too late. We lost her and the baby. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with a pain Sarah could almost touch. Suddenly, everything made sense. His anger, the need to film, the cruelty with which he spread the video. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He was trying to save her, in the only twisted and broken way he knew. "When was that?" Sarah asked softly. 5 years ago. Arthur wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Ever since, every day is hard. I blame myself. If I had insisted more, if I had stopped her somehow, it wouldn't have made a difference." Sarah was surprised by her own words, but she knew they were true. If she was like me, she would have found a way. Because that's what mothers do. We do what needs to be done, even when it's dangerous, even when it's wrong. Arthur looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You could have died. Your baby could have died." "But we didn't." Sarah placed a hand over her still painful incision. "We're alive, and we're going to be fine. Because of me, you almost weren't. You're right, what you did was terrible, but I understand now. And, I forgive you." Arthur stared at her, clearly surprised. "You forgive me?" "I forgive you, because holding on to anger will only hurt me, and I already have enough to worry about." Arthur stood there for another moment, as if he didn't know what to do with that forgiveness. Then, slowly, he pulled something out of his pocket. A brown envelope, folded and crumpled. "This is for you." He held out the envelope. "It's not much. It's what I had saved, but maybe it'll help with the baby's expenses." Sarah took the envelope and opened it. Inside was money. A lot of money. She counted quickly. $1,700. Exactly what was missing for David's payment. "Mr. Arthur, I can't accept this. It's too much money." "You can and you will," he said firmly. "Consider it a way for me to try to do the right thing for the first time in 5 years. But, please," and this time there was pleading in his voice, "let me do this. Let me try to fix some of the damage I caused." Sarah looked at the money in her hands, then at the man in front of her. A man, broken by grief, trying to find redemption in the only way he knew. How could she deny him that? How could she deny herself the help she so desperately needed? "Thank you," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Thank you, Mr. Arthur." He nodded once, and then turned to leave, but Sarah called out to him, "Mr. Arthur, when my son leaves the hospital, would you like to meet him? To see that he's okay, that he survived?" Arthur stopped, his back still turned to her. She saw his shoulders tremble slightly. "I would love to," he said so quietly that Sarah almost didn't hear it, and then he walked away slowly down the street, an old man carrying the weight of 5 years of guilt that was finally starting to lift. Sarah stood there, the envelope still in her hands, feeling as if she had just witnessed something sacred, a transformation. A man who had tried to destroy her was now trying to save her, and she had allowed it. She had forgiven. And in that forgiveness, something inside her also began to heal. That afternoon, Sarah went to Central Mercy Hospital and made the payment for David's treatment. The relief on the financial clerk's face when she received the money was evident. The treatment would continue. David would live to see his son grow up. When she told David about Arthur, about the money, about everything, he was silent for a long time. "You forgave him." It wasn't a question. "I did." "You're a better person than me," David admitted. "I don't know if I could do the same. Holding on to anger only hurts us, and we already have enough pain." David took her hand, pulling her closer. "I love you. You know that, right? I love you more than anything in this world." "I know," Sarah said, kissing his forehead. "And I love you too. I always will." The following weeks were a blur of hospital visits, both to see David and to see Noah. The baby was getting stronger day by day, gaining weight, learning to breathe on his own. The doctors were optimistic. He could be discharged in a month, maybe less. David also showed signs of improvement. The treatment was working, slowly, but working. There was hope again, a light at the end of the tunnel that had seemed endless for so long. And then, on a Saturday morning, while Sarah was visiting Noah, she saw a familiar face through the glass of the neonatal ICU. Arthur Jenkins was there, his hands pressed against the glass, looking at the babies with an expression of pure wonder. Sarah approached silently and stood beside him. "Which one is yours?" Arthur asked, without taking his eyes off the babies. "That one, the third from the left, Noah David Miller." Arthur looked at little Noah, with his tubes and monitors, fighting bravely to live. And then he did something Sarah never expected to see. He smiled. It was a small, sad, but genuine smile. "He looks like a fighter. He is, just like his father, just like me. He's lucky to have a mother like you." Sarah turned to look at Arthur. He looked different. His shoulders weren't as hunched, his face wasn't as hard, as if some of the weight he carried had been lifted. "Mr. Arthur, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Your daughter, did she have a name?" Arthur closed his eyes for a moment. "Clara. And the baby was going to be called Caleb." "Clara and Caleb," Sarah repeated softly. "Beautiful names." "They were beautiful people," Arthur said, opening his eyes, and Sarah saw tears there. "I should have protected them better. You did what you could. Sometimes that's not enough, but that doesn't mean it was your fault. I spent 5 years believing it was." "And now?" Arthur was silent, looking at Noah again. "Now I think maybe it's time to forgive myself too." They stood there for another half-hour, two strangers who had started as enemies and were now finding something like peace next to each other. And when Arthur finally said goodbye, Sarah knew something fundamental had changed between them. The following week brought more changes. Mrs. Martha organized a neighborhood watch group fundraiser to help with the medical costs. To Sarah's surprise, many people contributed. Not only those who had always been kind, but also some who had actively taken part in her public humiliation. They all seemed ashamed, wanting somehow to make amends. Diane, from the corner bakery, offered Sarah a part-time job as soon as she fully recovered. Nothing too heavy, just helping with bread and cake production. The pay wasn't much, but it would be a steady income. something they could count on. And Arthur became a constant presence. He would show up at Sarah's house with groceries, always leaving the bags at the door and leaving before she could thank him. He visited Noah at the hospital on the days Sarah couldn't go. And slowly, very slowly, he began to talk about Clara. She was stubborn, just like you, he said one afternoon as the two had coffee in Sarah's small kitchen. Once she got an idea in her head, there was no getting it out. What was she like? Physically, I mean. She had dark hair, long, she liked to wear braids, and she had a smile that lit up any room. Arthur's eyes grew distant, lost in memories. Her husband, Caleb, was a good man, hard-working. He lost himself after she started drinking, ended up leaving town. I never heard from him again. I'm sorry, me too. I lost my daughter and my son-in-law in the same year. I've been alone ever since. You don't have to be alone, Sarah said gently. You have friends, you have neighbors, you have us. Arthur looked at her, surprised. Even after everything I did, especially after everything you did, because you've shown you can change, that you can be better, and that means much more than never having made mistakes in the first place. That night, after Arthur left, Sarah sat down to write in an old notebook she had bought. She wasn't sure why, but she felt the need to record everything that was happening, so that one day, when Noah was older, he could read and understand about strength, about forgiveness, about how the most unlikely people can become family. She wrote about the day Arthur filmed her, about the humiliation that followed. She wrote about David at the hospital, about the baby who came too early. She wrote about Allison and her unexpected kindness, and she wrote about how a bitter old man became her greatest ally. And as she wrote, Sarah realized something. She was happy, despite everything, despite every obstacle and every hardship. She was genuinely happy, because she had love in her life. She had a husband who fought to live. She had a son who fought to grow. She had friends who showed up in the darkest hours. And she had Arthur, an unofficial grandfather for Noah, an unlikely friend for her and David, living proof that it's never too late to change. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. 3 weeks after Noah's birth, David was discharged from the hospital. His treatment would continue, but now on an outpatient basis. He could go home. He could finally start living as a father. The day he came home was a celebration. Mrs. Martha organized a community lunch in the backyard of the house. Nothing too elaborate, but it was made with care. There was rice, beans, roast chicken, salads, and of course Sarah's cornbread muffins, which were being made again with the help of some neighbors. Arthur was there too. At first he kept his distance, as if unsure he was welcome, but David, upon seeing him, walked over and extended his hand. "Thank you." That was all David said, but it was enough. Arthur shook his hand, and Sarah saw tears in the old man's eyes. Tears he didn't try to hide. The party lasted until late afternoon. And when everyone had already left, when only Sarah, David, and Arthur remained, they sat in the small backyard and talked. They talked about plans for the future, about hopes, about dreams that had seemed impossible just weeks ago, but now felt within reach. "When Noah gets out of the hospital," David said, "I want to have a barbecue, invite everyone, celebrate for real." "And I'll help," Arthur immediately offered. "I can take care of the drinks and the charcoal. You don't have to—" "I know I don't have to, but I want to." Arthur looked at the two of them, and Sarah saw sincerity in his eyes. "You gave me a second chance. You gave me a purpose again. Let me do this. Let me be part of it." "You're already part of it, Mr. Arthur," Sarah said. "Your family." The word family seemed to echo in the air. Arthur was silent, processing. And then he nodded, as if accepting something much bigger than a simple statement. 2 weeks later, Noah was discharged from the neonatal ICU. He was still small, would still need special care, but he was healthy, he was alive, he was going home. Sarah carried her son for the first time without glass barriers or tubes in the way. His weight in her arms was the most beautiful weight she had ever felt. David was beside her, his hand on her shoulder, looking at their son with tears of joy. "We did it," he whispered. "We really did it." "Yes." Sarah kissed Noah's forehead. "We did it." Outside the hospital, a small group was waiting. Alison was there, smiling, Mrs. Martha with a bouquet of flowers, Brandon with a teddy bear, Diane with a cake she had made especially for the occasion, and Arthur, holding a small baby stroller he had bought with his savings. "For Noah," he said, a little awkwardly. "I thought you might need one." Sarah couldn't trust her voice to answer. She just nodded, tears streaming freely. David went over to Arthur and hugged him, a hug that Arthur hesitated a moment before returning. And there, in front of that hospital that had seen so much suffering, an unlikely family was gathered, not bound by blood, but by something stronger, by choice, by forgiveness, by love. The barbecue happened the following weekend, in the backyard of the house that Sarah, David, and Noah now called home. It wasn't big, but it was enough. Arthur was at the grill, wearing an apron that Mrs. Martha had embroidered for him. David was sitting in a chair, still recovering but smiling. Sarah was holding Noah, introducing the baby to everyone who wanted to meet him. "He has your eyes," Alison commented, stroking Noah's chubby cheek. "And his father's stubbornness." Sarah laughed. "Look how he grabs my finger, won't let go for anything." The afternoon was perfect. Good food, even better company. Laughter filling the air. And when the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah found herself looking around and memorizing every detail. This was the moment. This was the dream she had fought so hard to achieve. It wasn't perfect. They still had bills to pay, treatments to continue, challenges ahead. But they were together, and together they could face anything. "What are you thinking about?" David asked, appearing beside her. "About how strange life is," Sarah answered. "A few months ago, I was carrying sacks of corn, being filmed and judged. I thought I had lost everything. And now look at this." She gestured to the backyard full of people, to Arthur laughing at a joke from Brandon, to Alison and Mrs. Martha chatting animatedly, to Noah sleeping peacefully in his stroller. "Now I have everything," she concluded. David pulled her into a hug, careful with the incision still healing. "We have everything," he corrected himself. "And we're going to take care of it. We're going to take care of this family we've built." That night, after everyone had left, after Noah had been put to bed, Sarah and David sat on the small couch in the living room. They didn't talk much. They just sat there, hands intertwined, listening to the sound of their son's breathing in the next room. And Sarah thought about how love can manifest in the most unexpected ways, how a stranger can become family, how forgiveness can heal not only the forgiven, but also the one who forgives, how, sometimes, the worst situations can lead to the best outcomes. She thought about Arthur, about how he had started as an enemy and become the grandfather Noah would never know wasn't his by blood. She thought about Alison, who could have simply done her job, but chose to care. She thought about Mrs. Martha and all the neighbors who could have kept judging but chose to help. And she thought about herself, about how she had fought, had fallen, had gotten back up again, about how she had carried those bags of corn, each one weighing more than she could bear, but bearing them anyway, about how she had been filmed in her most vulnerable moment and had survived the humiliation. She was stronger than she imagined, and now she knew it. The following months brought a new routine. Sarah started working part-time at Diane's Corner Bakery. The work was good, the atmosphere was welcoming, and the salary, though modest, helped. David continued his treatment, and the doctors were increasingly optimistic. The disease was in remission. He was gaining weight, regaining strength. Noah grew fast, surprising the doctors. Despite being born premature, he was developing wonderfully. His eyes, initially closed and sensitive, now open to the world with curiosity. He smiled, he played, he was perfect. And Arthur. Arthur was always nearby, not intrusively but present. He taught David how to make some repairs around the house. He helped Sarah plant a small garden in the backyard. And when Noah turned 6 months old, it was Arthur who showed up with an old camera to photograph the moment. "So he'll remember," Arthur explained, clearly embarrassed by the display of emotion. "So he'll know he was loved from day one." Sarah would keep those photos as treasures, not just the images of Noah, but also those of Arthur, holding the baby in his arms, his wrinkled face lit up by a genuine smile. The old man's transformation was complete, and it was beautiful to see. One day when Noah was 9 months old, Sarah went to visit Clara's grave. She brought flowers, sat on the grass beside the headstone, and talked. She talked about Arthur, about how he had changed. She talked about Noah, about how he was growing strong and healthy. She talked about forgiveness and second chances. "He still loves you," Sarah said to the headstone. "He'll always love you. But now he's living again too. And I think that's what you would want. I think that's what every mother would want for her loved ones." Upon leaving the cemetery, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't expected, as if she had closed a circle, as if she had honored the memory of a woman she had never met, but who, in a way, had completely changed her life. That night at dinner, Sarah made an announcement. "I've been thinking," she began, looking at David, and then at Arthur, who had been invited for dinner. "When Noah turns 1, I'd like to have a party. Nothing too big, but meaningful, and I wanted—" She hesitated, then continued. "I wanted you to be his godfather, Mr. Arthur. Officially." Arthur dropped his fork, clearly shocked. Are you sure?" "Absolutely." David agreed. "You've been here for us since you realized you were wrong. You became family, and family is who stays, who helps, who loves. You are all of those things to us." Arthur remained silent for a long moment. Sarah saw him swallow hard, fighting his emotions. "I would love to." He finally managed to say, his voice hoarse, "It would be an honor." And that's how, when Noah turned 1, there was a party in the backyard of the house. And that's how Arthur Jenkins, a man who had started as an enemy, officially became Noah's godfather. That's how a broken family was put back together, stronger than before. During the party, while people ate and laughed and celebrated, Allison approached Sarah. "You know your story has already spread, right?" she said. "Not in a bad way, in a good way. People are talking about forgiveness, about second chances. You've touched a lot of people, Sarah. I just did what needed to be done. No, you did more than that. You changed a life. You saved a man from his own bitterness. And in doing that, you saved yourself too." Sarah looked over at where Arthur was, holding Noah in his arms, showing him something in the garden while the baby watched in fascination. The scene was so natural, so full of love, that it was hard to imagine that just a year ago, these two were on opposite sides of a silent war. "I think we all saved each other," Sarah said. "That's what family does." The following years were the happiest of Sarah's life. David healed completely, going back to work as a painter. Noah grew up strong and healthy, starting to walk, to talk, to explore the world with that endless childlike curiosity. Arthur became the grandfather who spent his days taking care of Noah while Sarah and David worked. The cornbread muffin cooperative that Sarah had dreamed of began to become a reality. With the help of Diane and a few other women from the neighborhood, they put together a small business. Nothing too big, but enough to provide some extra income for everyone involved. And Arthur used his savings to buy better equipment for the cooperative. He became the unofficial manager, handling the logistics, the deliveries, the contacts with suppliers. He found a purpose again, a reason to wake up every morning. Once, when Noah was already 3 years old, he asked, "Grandpa Arthur, why don't you live with us?" Arthur looked at Sarah and David, clearly unsure how to answer. It was David who spoke. "You know what, Mr. Arthur? Noah is right. Why don't you live with us? We have an extra room. It would be easier for everyone." "I don't want to be a burden." "You wouldn't be a burden," Sarah said. "You'd be family, which is what you already are." And that's how Arthur Jenkins sold his old house and moved into Sarah and David's home. That's how Noah got a full-time grandfather. That's how a family became complete. 5 years after that fateful day when Arthur filmed Sarah carrying bags of corn, They were all gathered in the backyard to celebrate Noah's 6th birthday. The Cornbread Muffin Cooperative now employed 15 women. David had been completely cured for 2 years. Sarah had become a successful small business owner, respected in the neighborhood and beyond. And Arthur was the happiest man Sarah had ever seen. He spent his days playing with Noah, teaching his grandson how to plant, fish, and do small repairs. He had gained weight, his face no longer marked by sadness. He smiled. He laughed. He lived. During the party, Sarah found herself watching Arthur and Noah together. The boy was showing his grandfather a drawing he had made at school. It was a simple house with 4 figures in front. A man, a woman, a child, and an old man. Below, in crooked letters, it read, "My family. It's beautiful, isn't it?" David appeared next to Sarah, following her gaze. "It's perfect." Sarah agreed. "All of this is perfect. Who would have thought, that the man who tried to destroy us would become the most important person in our son's life?" "That's what forgiveness does," Sarah said. "It transforms not only the one who is forgiven, but also the one who forgives, and everyone around." David pulled her into a hug, and they stood there watching their family. A family that wasn't conventional, that didn't follow traditional patterns, but was theirs. It was real. It was based on love and choice and forgiveness. That night, after the party ended, after Noah was put to bed, the 3 adults sat on the porch. There was something in the air, a sense of completeness, of a cycle closed. "You know," Arthur began, his voice heavy with emotion, "I spent 5 years of my life wishing I could be with my daughter, wishing I could go back in time and change things. And then you showed up, and you gave me a second chance I didn't deserve." "Everyone deserves a second chance," Sarah said, "but not everyone accepts it. Not everyone changes." Arthur looked at them. "I could have stayed bitter. I could have rejected your forgiveness. But you wouldn't let me. You insisted on including me, on making me part of something bigger." "Because we saw beyond what you did," David said. "We saw who you could be. And now look." Arthur smiled, but there were tears in his eyes. "Now I have a grandson, a family, a purpose. I have everything." They were silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Sarah took both their hands, joining them all in a circle. "We have everything," she corrected, "and we're going to take care of it forever." And there, on that small porch, in that simple house in a working-class neighborhood, 3 people who had been broken by life found healing in one another. They found family. They found love. Their story wasn't perfect. There were scars. There were painful memories. There were hard times that still sometimes came back. But it was theirs, and it was real, and it was based on the most powerful thing there is, the ability to forgive, to change, and to choose love above all else. Years later, when Noah was already a teenager, he would ask about that day. The day his grandfather filmed his mother and almost destroyed everything. And Sarah would tell the whole story, without hiding the hard parts, without sugarcoating the truth. And then she would say, "But look where we are now. Look at what we built from that terrible moment. Love can always overcome hate. Forgiveness can always overcome hurt. And family isn't just blood. It's choice. It's commitment. It's showing up even when it's hard." And Noah would understand, because he had grown up seeing that every day, seeing how 3 completely different people became a family, how hatred turned into love, how destruction became creation. That was the lesson. That was the story worth telling. Not just about a pregnant woman carrying bags of corn or about a cruel neighbor who filmed her struggle, but about how, in the end, love wins. It always wins. In the present, at that 6th birthday party, as the sun set and night began to fall, Sarah looked around one more time, at David, safe and strong, at Noah, happy and loved, at Arthur, finally at peace, at all the friends who had become family. And she knew with absolute certainty that every tear shed, every pain endured, every moment of despair had been worth it, because it had led her here, to that perfect moment where everything finally made sense. The Cornbread Muffin Cooperative they had created wasn't just a business, it was a symbol. A symbol of how women can unite and strengthen each other, of how a community can heal when it chooses support over judgment. And it had all started with that video, that moment of humiliation that Sarah thought would destroy her. But it didn't destroy her. It only transformed her, and transformed everyone around her. When Alison arrived at the party late in the afternoon, she brought news. "Sarah, you need to see this." She showed her phone where an article was open. "That story I told you about you and Arthur, it reached a journalist friend of mine. She wants to write about you too." "Write what?" "About forgiveness, about second chances, about how a community can transform." Alison smiled. "Your story has touched a lot of people, Sarah, and it can touch many more." Sarah looked at David, who shrugged with a smile. "It's your decision, honey." She thought for a moment. Exposing her life again, after everything she had been through, wasn't something she did lightly. But if it could help other people, if it could show that it's possible to overcome even the most difficult situations— "All right," she agreed. "But I want Arthur to be part of the story too, because it's not just about me. It's about all of us." "Of course," Alison agreed. "It's about the family you built." In the following months, the story of Sarah, David, and Arthur was published in a regional newspaper. And then it was republished on a national website. And then it started to spread across social media, not the way it had spread before, with judgment and cruelty, but with admiration and respect. People from all over the country began sending messages, sharing their own stories of forgiveness, of overcoming, of unconventional families. The original video, the one Arthur had filmed, was reframed. Now it was seen not as a humiliation, but as the beginning of an inspiring journey. Arthur, who at first was uncomfortable with the attention, eventually accepted it, because he understood that his story could help other men trapped in their own bitterness. It could show that it's never too late to change. The Cornbread Muffin Cooperative started receiving orders from all over the state. They had to expand, hire more women, rent a larger space. What had started as Sarah's desperate need to make money became a thriving business that helped dozens of families. But most importantly, what really mattered was that they were together, and they were happy, and they were showing the world that it's possible to build something beautiful from the ashes. 2 years after the story was published, when Noah was 8 years old, they received an invitation. An organization that worked with conflict mediation and community reconciliation wanted them to speak at an event, share their experience, inspire others. At first, they all hesitated. Public speaking wasn't something any of them felt comfortable doing. But then Mrs. Martha, wise as always, said something that changed their minds. "You have a responsibility. You received something special, a transformation that most people never experience. Now you need to share it, not for yourselves, but for all the other people who are stuck in the same place you were." And she was right. So they accepted. The event took place in an auditorium in Sao Paulo. There were 200 people in the audience, each with their own stories of pain and conflict. Sarah spoke first, telling about the day she was filmed, about the humiliation, about the despair. David spoke about being sick and powerless, watching his wife destroy herself to save him, and the anger he felt when he discovered the truth. And then it was Arthur's turn. He walked to the microphone with hesitant steps, his hands trembling slightly. For a moment, Sarah thought he wouldn't be able to do it. But then he began to speak, and his voice grew steadier with every word. "I spent 5 years of my life hating the world," he started. "Hating myself, blaming everyone for a tragedy that had no one to blame. And then I saw a pregnant woman carrying a bag of corn, and all that hatred exploded. I filmed her. I spread the video. I tried to ruin her life, and why? Because seeing that reminded me of my own pain, and I wanted her to suffer too." He paused, swallowing hard. "But you know what happened? Instead of hating me back, she forgave me. Instead of rejecting me, she included me. Instead of letting me drown in my own bitterness, she pulled me up. And today I have a family. I have a grandson I love more than anything. I have a purpose. I have a life worth living." Tears streamed freely down Arthur's face now, but he wasn't ashamed of them. "If I can change, if I can be forgiven after everything I've done, then anyone can. There's no hatred so deep that love can't reach it. There's no mistake so big that forgiveness can't cover it. I'm living proof of that." When he finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. But more than that, Sarah saw tears on the faces of many people in the audience. She saw recognition. She saw hope. And she knew they had done the right thing by sharing their story. In the years that followed, they would speak at many events, they would train mediators, they would help resolve conflicts in communities. Always as a team, always together, always sharing the message that forgiveness is not weakness, but the purest demonstration of strength. Noah grew up seeing all of this, seeing his mother turn pain into purpose, seeing his father overcome illness and weakness, seeing his grandfather transform from a bitter man into a beacon of hope for others. And when he was 12, Noah wrote a school essay about heroes. But he didn't write about superheroes or celebrities. He wrote about his family, about 3 ordinary people who made extraordinary choices, who chose love over hate, forgiveness over revenge, unity over division. The essay was published in the school newspaper, then on a local blog, and then it went viral, just like the original story years before. But this time, Noah was ready. He knew his family was special, and he was proud of it. One afternoon, when Noah was 13, he found Arthur sitting alone in the backyard, looking at the small garden they had planted together years ago. "Grandpa, can I ask you something?" "Of course, kid. Do you still think about Clara and Caleb?" Arthur was silent for a moment, surprised by the direct question. "Every day," he admitted. "But now, when I think of them, it's not just sadness I feel, it's also gratitude, because they taught me how to love, and that love, even after they were gone, still lives in me. And now I can give that love to you, to your mother, to your father. Do you think they'd be proud of you?" Arthur looked at his grandson, seeing wisdom far beyond his 13 years. "I hope so. I hope they can see from somewhere how I've changed, how I found a way to keep living even after losing them." He put his hand on Noah's shoulder. "And I know they would love you, just like I do." Noah hugged his grandfather, and they stayed like that for a long moment. An old man and a boy united by an unlikely story of redemption and love. That night, during dinner, Sarah looked around the table. David to her right, still strong and healthy 10 years after his recovery. Arthur to her left, now 78 but still active and present. Noah across from her, growing so fast, becoming an incredible young man. "Do you know what day it is today?" she asked. "Tuesday," Noah answered, confused. "Yes, but also—" Sarah smiled. "It's exactly been 10 years today since it all started. 10 years since that video. 10 years since the day that changed our lives." David took her hand, intertwining his fingers. 10 years, he repeated. "Feels like a lifetime." And it is. Arthur agreed. "It is a lifetime. A life I wouldn't have if it weren't for you." "It's not just us," Sarah said. "It's all of us. Together. Always together." They toasted, with juice for Noah and water for the adults, celebrating not the day when everything almost fell apart, but the day they started building something new, something stronger, something lasting. And as they talked and laughed, as Noah told them about his day at school, and Mr. Arthur shared a new recipe he wanted to try, Sarah allowed herself a moment of pure gratitude. Gratitude for having survived those dark days. Gratitude for having found strength when she thought she had none left. Gratitude for the forgiveness that turned an enemy into family. Gratitude for every person who had shown up in her life exactly when she needed them. But above all, gratitude for having learned that love always finds a way. No matter how dark the tunnel, no matter how high the wall, no matter how deep the wound, the Love always finds a way. And that was the real story, not about a pregnant woman carrying bags of corn, not about a cruel neighbor who filmed and humiliated her, but about how, in the end, love won. As it always does. The end of the story. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit like. It helps a lot, so more people can get to know inspiring stories like this one. Thank you so much for sticking with me this far.